I always thought secrets died in silence. I was wrong. Sometimes they leave fingerprints, ink pressed into paper, folded into a diary, waiting for the wrong person to open it. And I was that wrong person. It was a slow Sunday, the kind that smells like dust and familiarity. The ceiling fan traced lazy circles overhead, and the house was quiet except for the simmer of lunch in the kitchen. My sister had dropped her bag on the couch, careless for once. The diary, a navy blue hardbound with a frayed elastic, sat half open, like a mouth mid-confession. She never left it out. That alone should have been a warning. I told myself to walk away, but my feet stayed. My fingers moved. I slid the diary toward me. There, tucked between 2 pages, was a folded note, tight, precise, hidden like a blade. I unfolded it, and my heartbeat began to count down. At the reunion, I'll finally tell them the truth. They deserve to know what really happened. I didn't blink for 10 seconds. The words burned scars into my mind. The handwriting wasn't hers. It was too angular, too controlled. My sister's cursive had loops and softness. This looked like someone holding their anger just short of violence. Truth about what? What really happened when? And why the reunion? My sister had been the family's North Star, polished, perfect when it mattered, messy only in private. She didn't throw chaos into a room unless she meant it. If she planned to reveal something, it meant the reveal would detonate. The reunion was in 6 days. I felt my pulse rise like a tide, and then I started planning. The setup. I didn't confront her. Confrontation gives the other person control. If she knew I'd read her diary, she would lock up the truth, swallow it, spin it, and I wanted it raw. So I prepared a stage. That entire week I watched her. She was careful, but tension leaks. Her jaw clenched when Mom asked about logistics. She avoided Dad's stare. She received 2 calls where she left the room and never returned for 10 minutes. I noted the timing. I noted the silence after. On Wednesday, I slipped into Dad's study. He kept a small metal box under his desk, receipts, old correspondence, papers no one else ever needed to read. He'd changed the combination last year. I knew the new one because I had watched him turn it after a fight with my sister. 4 digits, our birth months combined. Petty, simple. Inside, I found a second note, small, torn from a legal pad. The same angular handwriting, 4 words, perfectly spaced. If she won't, I will. I sat with that sentence like you sit with a stranger who knows your name. Someone was pressing, someone wanted a reveal, and they didn't care whose hands did the lifting. It wasn't just my sister. This secret had gravity. Flashback, the summer of Ash. 3 years earlier, my sister had vanished for 13 days. No calls, no texts, no explanations. She returned with a cough and hair that smelled faintly of smoke. When Mom asked, she said she stayed with a friend near Nashik. No signal, no drama. Dad didn't ask anything. He looked relieved enough to forgive the disappearing act. But the house changed after that. Silence became a habit. The laughter at dinner became careful. Dad started locking his study. Mom started sleeping with the TV on. My sister stopped leaving her diary on the table. And a photograph disappeared, one that had sat on the mantel since we were kids. It was gone so cleanly the dust had a rectangular shadow. A week later, the family car got a new paint job, and no one talked about why. That summer wrote itself into my mind as ash. Everything looked normal if you didn't touch it. If you did, it smeared. The reunion begins. Our reunion tradition is predictable. Buffet, drinks, lawn lights, the same jokes retold with new punchlines, kids running under chairs, the older cousins pretending they are too tired to dance. This time, it felt like all of that with a wire stretched across the room waiting to trip someone. My sister wore black. She never wears black to reunions. She hugged everyone, smiled too brightly, and kept her diary close to her body like a fragile heart. I kept my distance and checked exits instead. If truth was coming, it needed witnesses. After dinner, I suggested a story circle. It sounded innocent enough. We've done it before. Funny anecdotes, embarrassing childhood memories, tiny secrets like who broke the antique vase. But my voice had a blade tucked into it when I said it this time. Let's share the stories we never finished. Let's do truths. Heads turned, laughter bubbled. My sister's smile tightened. She stood, hands trembling if you knew her well, and opened the diary. She scanned the first page like it would tell her whether to jump. I didn't let her. I found something, and my words cut the room into shards. A note in your diary. Silence fell. Even the kids paused. Even the air paused. Dad's expression, I'll never forget it, shifted like a weather map. Shock, anger, fear. Mom pressed her lips together until they turned white. I read the note aloud. At the reunion, I'll finally tell them the truth. They deserve to know what really happened. Auntie made a sound like a gasp turned into a prayer. Someone set down a glass too hard. It cracked. My sister's face drained. She didn't look at me, she looked at Dad, and that told the room everything it needed to know. What truth? What happened? Tell us, Dad said. He didn't say it loudly, he didn't need to. When he speaks softly, it means the ground is already giving way. The first reveal. My sister took a breath that shook. She touched the diary like it could anchor her, then moved it away like it couldn't. This isn't the way, she whispered. This isn't. Say it, Dad said. Her voice broke on the first sentence. 3 years ago, I wasn't in Nashik. I was with him. She didn't say the name. She didn't have to. The room knew which him. The one she dated briefly. The one Dad hated. The one who showed up once with a thin smile and left with a hard glare. The one with a job that sounded legitimate until you asked for details. He called me that night. He said he had something I needed to see. Something about Dad. I went. I was stupid. She stopped. She looked at Dad, then at Mom. Tears collected but didn't fall. My sister hates letting gravity win. He had proof, she said. A recording, a document. I don't know what was real and what was staged, but it was enough to make me believe. It said Dad did something, 10 years ago, something that could ruin us. Dad didn't blink. He looked like a statue with a storm behind it. Why didn't you tell me? Mom asked. Her voice was a quiet wound. I tried, she said, but I was scared. I thought if I told you, you'd protect Dad and get hurt. I thought if I told Dad, he'd protect us and be destroyed. I thought if I kept it small, it could disappear. And the car? I asked. My voice sounded colder than I intended. The missing photograph? She swallowed. He made me remove it. He said it was a weak link, something someone could use. I didn't know why. You obeyed, I finished. Yes. The room turned on her, not violently, but with those little tilts of the head, that quiet blame that sounds like pity if you don't listen too hard. Dad finally spoke. What was in the recording? She shook her head. I'll show you privately. That's not how truth works, I said. You don't get to choose the terms. You brought the bomb, I said. You don't get to choose where the shrapnel lands. That's enough, Mom snapped. Her voice cracked with a kind of authority that reminded me we were all still children when she needed us to be. We didn't get far that night. Voices rose, chairs scraped. The reunion split itself into 2 rooms. People who wanted blood, people who wanted bandages. My sister didn't leave. She sat in a corner, knuckles white, eyes burning. Dad walked outside. Mom followed. Aunts pretended to clean. Cousins whispered like news anchors. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. No one moved. It rang again, harder. I opened it. He stood there. Thin smile, expensive shoes, the kind of confidence that grows in places without witnesses. He didn't look at me, he looked past me, at the living room, at the diary, at my sister's fixed stare. Evening, he said. I thought I'd drop by. How did he know? How did he time?
How did he walk into our home like he owns our calendar? Dad returned to the doorway with a face like weathered stone. Mom hovered behind him, trembling but resolute. What do you want? Dad asked. He held up a small USB drive. I want the truth to be treated like currency. Fair exchange. I give, you give. What do you think we have? I asked. He smiled. You have loyalty. I have leverage. My sister's voice was a broken blade. Leave. Not until we finish what we started, he said, eyes never leaving her. I felt something turn inside me, a gear, a cruel little lever. I had been planning to expose her, but the truth had its own director now, and I hated him. Fine, I said. Play it. Mom whispered my name. Dad didn't stop me. He plugged the USB drive into our TV. The screen lit up, gray, then sharpened. Audio crackled, then became a conversation. Dad's voice, 10 years younger. Another man's voice. Numbers, contracts, a name we recognized, a name attached to a scandal that faded too fast in the papers. It wasn't explicit enough to convict, but it was damning enough to stain. The room breathed as a single organism. The sound ended. The screen went black. My sister hid her face. Dad stood very still. Mom broke. The fracture. Nothing explodes like a family. Outside, you don't hear it because it's polite. Inside, it's noise. Pain becomes architecture. Trust becomes furniture that won't fit through the door. Dad didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He said, "Go," to my sister's ex, and the man had the audacity to stay. "No exchange," he said. "No deal." I walked toward him and said very softly, "I think you should leave." He didn't, so I showed him the study door. He took the hint. Once he was gone, the room diffused into a dozen conversations. Some scolded my sister, some begged for details. Some turned on me. "Why did you read the diary? Why did you set the stage? Who do you think you are?" I wanted to say, the director, the one who refuses silence, the voice that cuts fog. But the truth is, I didn't feel like a director. I felt like a match. Dad went to his study, Mom to the kitchen, my sister to the guest room, diary pressed to her chest like a shield. I stayed with the USB drive in my hand, feeling it pulse like guilt. The reckoning. In the days after, the house learned new ways to be quiet. We spoke around each other. We cooked alone. We slept in shifts. The phone rang constantly, relatives hungry for updates, friends pretending they were just checking in, one number that never spoke when I answered. On the third day, my sister knocked on my door. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had performed a marathon while not moving. "Come with me," she said. We drove to a small cafe on the edge of the city. She chose a table in the corner, where the camera couldn't see our faces in full if one existed. Paranoia had become a reflex. "I need to tell you the whole thing, not the version from the reunion, the version with blood." My stomach tightened. "Say it." She told me about the warehouse, one floor, one back room, one padlock that didn't quite close. She told me about the cash drop, the signatures, the number of times she asked to leave, and the number of times he said, "Just one more favor." She told me about the car respray, how the paint wasn't for vanity. She told me about the photograph on the mantel, how a face in the corner belonged to someone Dad didn't want to be associated with anymore. Dad wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the monster. He was desperate, and he made terrible choices. I was the cover, and you, she exhaled, you were the audience. "Why didn't you tell me back then?" I asked. She stared at her empty cup. "Because you love clean lines. You think truth is a blade. I thought you'd cut in the wrong direction." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself. But the thing about being called a blade is you're either sharp or you're not, and I was sharp, and I had cut. "What happens now?" I asked. "We make him pay." "Dad?" I whispered, confused and afraid. She shook her head. "No, the one who thinks he owns the script." The reversal. We built a counter stage, quietly, smartly. My sister knew his obsessions, control, documentation, watching the room when he's sure he was unseen. We planted a new note in Dad's study, one with bait. "Final exchange this Friday. Bring proof, no backups." We left the window latch accidentally open. We positioned the study camera, an old webcam, just so. We placed the USB drive back on the desk like a trophy. Then we waited. He came. Of course he did. Drama addicts always arrive for the cliffhanger. He wore the same thin smile, the same expensive shoes. He held an envelope. He didn't notice the camera, or if he did, he thought it was harmless. He plugged in a new drive. He opened a file. He checked angles. He sat in Dad's chair and enjoyed it. And that was when Dad walked in. I had never seen my father look so deliberate, not angry, not frantic, controlled. He closed the door. He clicked a recorder we had placed under the desk. He sat down opposite the man and said exactly what we told him to say. "No exchange tonight. No deal." "You don't get to refuse," the man replied. "You don't get to demand," Dad said. "If she won't tell them, I will." The man tapped the envelope. "I will burn you down." Dad leaned in. "Then burn." The pause after that line was the kind of silence you only hear when two people realize they've both lost something they cannot get back. And then the man did what arrogant men do. He said too much. He bragged. He named a date. He named a place. He named a person who had helped him stage the recording. The webcam saw everything. The recorder heard everything. The bait worked. When he left, my sister was in the hallway. She stepped aside. She didn't look at him. He didn't look at her. Predators rarely look back when they think they've bitten. The call. We didn't go to the police, not yet. We went to someone else, someone who owed Dad a favor in a language only powerful men speak. I hated that. I wanted clean justice. My sister wanted effective justice. We compromised. A favor produced a meeting. The meeting produced pressure. Pressure produced fear. And fear produced what we wanted, a withdrawal. The man faded. His threats stopped. His anonymous texts went quiet. His expensive shoes moved in other circles. It wasn't victory. It was a reprieve. But reprieve is a kind of victory when the alternative is fire. The mirror. After the crisis cooled, the heat remained. The house learned to breathe again, but not like before. You don't go back to the old rhythm after a symphony of breaking. One evening, I stood in front of the empty mantel. The missing photograph had become a metaphor, and I was finally ready to test it. I went to the storage room. I found the box where Mom kept saved things. Inside, wrapped in old newspapers, was the frame. I lifted it. In the corner of the picture, there he was, younger, smiling, wearing a shirt none of us remembered until that moment. Dad had moved in circles we pretended didn't exist. My sister had protected him from those circles. I had cut the rope my sister used to tie the door closed. I placed the photo back where it belonged. The dust made a rectangle around it. The picture looked too bright in its old home. My sister walked in and stopped. "You're brave," she said. "No, I'm thorough," I replied. She smiled. "Same thing, sometimes." We stood there for a long time, two people who used different weapons to fight the same fear. Final reflection. Here's the hard truth I didn't want to learn. Exposing a secret doesn't return the world to order, it rearranges it. Sometimes it cleans poison, sometimes it smears it deeper, sometimes it gives you just enough light to see where the darkness started. I found a note in my sister's diary. I turned it into a stage. I forced a confession, and then I had to learn the rest, the parts that didn't fit easily into hero and villain. My sister was a protector and a liar. My father was flawed and cornered. The man who thought he directed us learned what happens when the cast rewrites the script. If you're listening and thinking about a secret you've kept, understand this. Truth is not a blade, it's a mirror. When you lift it, you cut yourself on the edges and see yourself in the reflection at the same time. I wanted to be the director. It turns out I was just another actor, delivering lines I didn't write, in a play we couldn't cancel. My sister never forgave me fully. I deserved that. But she began speaking to me again, slowly, carefully, sometimes with jokes so small they felt like seeds. Dad started leaving the study door open. Mom stopped sleeping with the TV on. The photograph stayed on the mantel. The reunion never happened again. Not like that. We didn't need a crowd for truth anymore. We had our own 3-person audience, and that was enough. Do I regret reading the diary? Sometimes yes. Do I regret exposing the note? Sometimes no. It's both. You don't get clean endings in real life. You get choices with consequences, and then you narrate them, hoping the story sounds like courage instead of recklessness. What I did next changed everything. It didn't fix everything, but it changed it in a way that allowed us to stop pretending. And if you're asking whether I would open the diary again, if the same note appeared, if the same threat pulsed in those words, I would. I would open it. I would unfold it. I would prepare the stage. I would also stay for the aftermath. Because truth isn't the end of the story, it's